Louisiana is a startling place to be. You know, firstly, it's the sort of complex perversity of some of the locations and the plantations, are that you're struck by this extraordinary beauty of these places, and you're aware of what has happened and what has occurred there. There's this, the woodland areas, the bayou, obviously, are stunning to look at, and then the life is that there's the kind of heat. You know, our first day of shooting was 108 degrees, high humidity, picking cotton out in the plantation, on the Apps plantation, and suddenly that sense that you're really kind of deep within this world. You know, you've slipped down the rabbit hole somehow, and then you're struck by the kind of reality of this thing. It's a very raw environment. It's the environment is already emotional, and then obviously what is occurring there is adds another level to that. So it's I don't know. I think I went back. You know, when you go to the book and Solomon Northup's book, and he talks about the environment at length, and only when you're there really do you really connect in a way, in a different way, in a deeper way somehow, to what he experienced.
You know, from very early on in the discussions, we didn't want it to look like a documentary. We didn't want it to we wanted it to look real, but there was no point in making it gritty. And also it was felt that this beauty would be a fantastic counterpoint to the horror. And we were lucky the locations were, they were beautiful. And one of the things that Steve and I had discussed from the beginning was a very painterly approach to the film. And, in choosing the aspect ratio we chose, the 2:40, that widescreen gives you an amazing palette for composition. And then the choice of the locations, the amazing work by Adam Stockhausen, the designer. All of those things go together, and you cannot help but make it beautiful, because it was.
The most horrific things happen in the most beautiful places. That was a thing that sort of, that was constant for me. And what was interesting about these plantations was that the sort of, they're left to the elements. They're not, some of them are not particularly looked after, or they should be in some kind of national trust. Mm-hmm. But filming those real locations, you felt the presence of the past. We were dancing with ghosts when we were shooting there.
When you first come onto a plantation, and I'm saying African-American woman, but also my Caucasian girlfriends that would be in the same pictures, as an American, you start to come down the road and you just get full of something. You get emotional, even if you're not thinking about it, something happens. And I think it is the history, not in terms of the recorded occurrence, but it's in our cultural DNA, and you feel it. And Steve, you said ghost. It's a communal experience, and things are passed on to you whether you know them or not. And so you feel that. It's very emotional. You weep. You don't think you can do it, and you have to really shut your mind off. Probably the same way that people that had to live and had to love and to keep going had to just keep going, and you're there just for a while. I think the job of an artist is we feel that a lot more. You see a lot more, Sean, than even I see when I walk on there. But your job, your discipline kicks in, and you realize that the point is you have to honor that you have to channel that by being as truthful and as specific, and that actually is the thing that feeds you. And then it becomes a transformative thing where it is sacred and it is joyful in a way, and you feel connected.
I went to drama school to stretch myself, to try and just to make myself more elastic so that I could be a better actor. And that was what I went through for 3 years. They threw me into all sorts of uncomfortable places. So when I received the script and was auditioning for Patsy, it was a dream come true, a character that asked me to be joyful and completely sorrowful at the same time, and to do it in such a way that those things weren't at odds. About a week before we started shooting, I was always, when I'm working on a character, I'm always trying to lift it off the page and understand the person further than what just is on the page. And so I was daydreaming in my hotel room about what Patsy would do in the little free time she had. And the fact that she picked 500 pounds of cotton a day struck me as someone who was obviously had very nimble fingers and was probably artistic. And so I was thinking about that, and I knew that Epps grew corn on his plantation. So I was like, oh, what if she made something out of the corn husk? And so I quickly looked it up online, and it was historically accurate that slaves did make crafts from corn husk. And so the next day I had a rehearsal with Steve, and we were just talking about the character, and I shared it with him, and he loved the idea and got the art department to supply me with corn husk that very day. And I wish, I really do feel like it was Patsy's guidance to that revelation, because it really did kind of come from nowhere. Yeah.
It is a large book, and in approach, I think all of us probably wanted to be reductive and not additive, and not try to create things or add something from a 2013 mindset, but really be faithful to the material. And I would encourage everyone to read it, because it really is one of the most phenomenal documents that I've had the opportunity to read. I wouldn't be the first person to say I was embarrassed to not have known about it prior to that, but it has been a real honor to be part of a group of people who restored it to a place of prominence in American literature. Communication is something that we certainly take for granted in 2013, but it was an irony in the book that he could have written a letter and left it to his wife, and she would have had an inkling of where he was and what was going on. I also think that it really spoke to the totality of Solomon, someone who used every part of himself, his wits, his guile, his physicality, to survive, and to try to find these ways to create ink and to quill and to steal paper, just fundamental aspects over a long period of time to survive and let people know who he was, I think was a marvelous attribute, and one that in particular in the conversations we really wanted to underscore was what this gentleman was all about.
I always felt, in a funny way, it wasn't a period piece. It was a conversation we needed to have now. And with the music, I wanted the music to be of now, so that this conversation would take place now. Because I think Steve and I, we work very instinctively together. I mean, the conversations we have are about feelings. They're not about history. And I think just like music is, you can't really talk about it. You can sort of feel it, you can perceive it, and I think that's really how the two of us found our way through this movie.
Someone asked me, when was the first time you came in contact with slavery? And I couldn't remember any. I couldn't remember. And the question was like, when did you first know your name? And I think, in a way, as a child, as a young person, to realize that your ancestors were slaves, and was for me kind of huge thing. It was. I think I must have been. I mean, I remember being very embarrassed and very ashamed in a way. And to start off life as a person like that, I think it's kind of. I never thought of it before, but it must have some sort of effect on your outlook on life. What it was about, I wanted that every footprint of Solomon was the audience's footprint. What he saw, you saw. I just love that idea of that first-hand account in the book, but also, as I turned the pages of the book, I had that same experience. Everything that he did, I didn't know what was coming next. And I think that was wanting the audience to be with Solomon, that you were Solomon. I live in Amsterdam, so Anne Frank is all around us. And when I read that book, it was like reading Anne Frank for the first time when I was a kid at school. It was every page was a revelation. Every page was sort of an insight into an horrendous horrendous time in history.
In a sense, I was aware of the responsibility of it. When Steve first sent me the script,
He said no. I'm sorry. He said no. What?
I just felt, there was just a lot of things in it that when I read it, I was just stunned by it, and I was stunned by the story. I was stunned by this character and this time, and I felt the kind of the responsibility of that. The responsibility not only to Solomon and to Solomon's descendants, and that very specific responsibility, but then also to tell a story from inside the slave experience in this way was something that I had never experienced, that I had never seen. It didn't take a very long time, but I realized ultimately as I went back to the book and I went back to the script that there was something about Solomon that I felt I needed to connect with. That actually, if I could find out about him and connect to him somehow, then I didn't have to worry about the wider implications of everything. I just had to tell his story. And I think that in the journey of him revealing himself to me in the book and then the sort of growing appreciation and understanding that I had for him as an individual, it allowed me to it compelled me to try and find him artistically.
One of the things that we tend to resist in terms of subject matter as Americans is anything placed in the slave era. But the truth is that for most of our history, for 300 years of our history, we're a slave economy, and that's longer than we've been anything else. But we don't want to not only look at that, but we don't want to hear about a person, whether it's Solomon or another person, during that period because of guilt and shame and anger and all those things. But what happens is you have a society that is not embracing or claiming the majority of its history. And so we get surprised when verdicts go a particular way and they do polls and everybody says, you think that, because it's as if someone is 21, they've moved to New York, they change their name and deny the fact that they have a childhood. They might rise in the ranks of some company, they might be very important, but they're always going to be off balance and they're always going to trip and not understand themselves. And so one of the things that I think that 12 years offers us, one of the great possibilities is that, Steve, I feel like you have painted such a realistic and complex landscape, a reality that we haven't seen before, that there's enough people and there's enough circumstance that all of us could imagine ourselves in it, whereas before we would always be at a distance. And something about imagining ourselves in it and imagining our people that we have come from in it makes it real, allows us to embrace it. And so we can see each other's point of view more readily because we have watched it unfold, all of us together, and hopefully there'll be a common language that we can start to listen to each other out.